By 1974, the Muslims and the Palestinians would set up checkpoints, and they would harass and bother the Christians, and they would stop people traveling. And they would stop people traveling, and they would look at their IDs. And in the Middle East, across the Middle East, not only in Lebanon, people's religion is written on their ID. Not only what your religion is, but what sect of that religion you belong to. If you are a Muslim, it is written in your ID if you are a Sunni or a Shia. If you are a Christian, it is written on your ID if you are a Greek Orthodox, a Catholic, a Maronite, a Protestant, or whatever. So when the Muslims and the Palestinians would stop the cars and they would look at their IDs, and if they would see that this is a Christian family traveling, they would get them out of the car and shoot them in cold blood. The word traveled fast, and we became prisoners to our homes and our communities and our towns. By 1975, the Muslims and the Palestinians were so empowered, financed and supported by Arabic countries, that they formed Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army, and started attacking and killing the Christians. We couldn't even get out of our houses. We are so fortunate here in America. Here we are. We show up to church to pray. We're not worried about our lives. We're not worried somebody's going to go in and shoot us. You know what started the all-out war in Lebanon was Palestinians and Muslims walking into a church on a Sunday morning, in a church like this, walking through these doors and firing at the crowd. 4 people died, 20 people were injured, and this is what started the war. At least in America, well, thank God we don't have to worry about that unless you live in Colorado Springs. The sad reality is, this is what happened to us in Lebanon. And then the Muslims started massacring us. They would walk into the Christian towns, and they would find people hiding, and they would start massacring. They had no conscience. They killed children as well as they killed the elderly. They would walk into a bomb shelter. They would find the mother and a father hiding with babies in the bomb shelter. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another leg to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk into our churches. They would urinate and defecate on the altar using the Bible as toilet paper. Who can forget what the Palestinians did after the withdrawal from Gaza last year, when the Palestinian torched 26 synagogues in Gaza, in Gush Katif? 26 synagogues. You didn't see much media coverage about that. And this is what they used to do to our churches in Lebanon. The last lady that worked for me, I hired her because she was mentally disturbed. And the reason why she was mentally disturbed is because they walked into her bomb shelter and they took her 16-year-old son, tied him on her lap, held a knife to her hand, and made her cut her own son's throat, and then raped her daughters in front of her. The monstrosities that they committed was unbelievable. They would take the Christian men and crucify them on crosses that they would stand downtown, and nail them to the crosses. And not only nail them to the crosses, but they would put honey on their chest and on their private parts so they would be stung by bees and wasps as they hung there dying. And then they would take them down from the crosses, lay them on the ground, and cut a cross across their chest to mark them, and other things. I think the biggest disservice the American media did to the American public is not show the beheading of Daniel Pearl and Nick Berg, is not show the beheadings of the other hostages in Iraq. Do you know that there has been 35 beheadings in Iraq since we went to Iraq? 35. Can you remember any names other than the 2, Daniel Pearl and Nick Berg? That's it. 35. The first time when they beheaded Daniel Pearl was in the news for 7 days. That's all you heard in the news. The West was shocked. Everywhere they were covering the story. When Nick Berg was beheaded, the story was covered for 3 days. Everybody else, all the others, the other 33, were barely a mention on the news. You can't even remember their names. This is the disservice that our politically correct media is doing to the American public that is so disgusting. They are treating us like children, as if we cannot make our own decisions. At least give us the opportunity to know what's coming our way so we can protect ourselves. We in Lebanon didn't have anywhere to go. We couldn't flee. They were killing us by the thousands. I come from South Lebanon. I lived in a town called Marjayoun as a child, where I was born and raised. Marjayoun was on the border with Israel. When the Palestinians surrounded us to slaughter us, and we knew what the outcome was going to be, we were basically going to be slaughtered. The elders in my town got together and they decided, well, we know we're going to be slaughtered at the hands of the Muslims. But if we go to the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we have more shared values with them than we have with the Muslims. And at that time, in Lebanon, the Jews were considered the enemy because the majority of the country was Muslim at that point. Because of the Palestinian refugee problem, that's all you saw on the media. Israel was called Azrael. Azrael is the name of the devil. All I heard on the news when I was growing up, watching television, is the Jews are barbaric, the Jews are evil, and that the only time we will have peace in the Middle East is when we kill all the Jews and throw them into the sea. My father owned a restaurant. I would eat dinner at my father's restaurant every night, and I would listen to the conversations around the dinner table, people sitting around us. And this is what I would hear them talking amongst themselves, watching the evening news. My father had the first TV set in South Lebanon, and it was a great attraction to bring people to the restaurant. And so people came. And this is what I heard. But when push came to shove, when our life was threatened, it was the Jews who are going to help and save the Christians. We, the Christians, knew that the Jews are not our enemy. Because after all, we are Christians. We share the same Bible. But the Muslims taught hatred. The Christians did not teach hatred. So a few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. They flagged down an Israeli patrol and they said, listen, the Palestinians are around us. They want to slaughter us. If you don't come and help us, they're going to be at your door within 48 hours. And Israel started coming in the middle of the night. And from 1976 till 1978, Israel would come under the cover of the night from 12 midnight till 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would bring ammunition to the Christian militia, our Christian militia. And they would bring food for the babies. And they would bring bomb shelters to those who did not have bomb shelters. And they would bring blankets and everything else we needed, medical supplies. And this is how we lived. And Israel would take the Christian men who didn't know how to fight, who were not the street kids, and would take them into Israel and train them how to fight. And so a partnership, a relationship developed, one-on-one, people to people. This went on for 2 years. When we first went into the bomb shelter, we didn't realize we were going to be there for long. I remember sleeping in cardboard boxes because my father had used our bomb shelter as a storage for our restaurant. And this is where he stored the fancy wines and the liqueurs and all of that stuff. And I remember my mother and I sleeping in a cardboard box that was a box for a washing machine we got. And we had coal inside the box, and my mother laid a blanket. And she said, oh, it's only for, a couple nights, and then we'll be back home. Couple nights turned into a couple weeks. And finally, we decided, forget the box, threw the box out, and we just laid on the floor, put the blanket on the floor, and slept. And this went on for 2 years. I remember I was 13 years old, and I remember we were going to be attacked that night, and a friend of ours from our militia stopped by, and he said, Brigitte, I just wanted to stop by and tell you that we heard over the radios that they are planning a big attack tonight, and I just wanted to wish you a merciful death when they come to kill us, if we die. But if we don't die, I'll stop by tomorrow, but if I don't see you, I want to wish you a merciful death, and he left. And I remember being in shock at 13 years old, and I asked my mother if I can wear my best Sunday dress, my Easter best. It was a dress that my mother had made for me, white and blue with white flowers. And I remember putting my dress on as my mother combed my long black hair that was down to my hips. And I was crying as she tied a white ribbon in my hair that matched the flowers in my dress. And I was begging her, I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old.